She said, "It's not my fault I'm flirty. It's just my personality." I smiled. Then I guess my reaction is just mine. She nearly fainted when my lawyer used her personality as the basis for enforcing the infidelity clause in our prenup. I, 34 am, never thought I'd be the guy who needed a prenup, but my lawyer insisted, and looking back now, that might be the best advice anyone ever gave me. My wife and I met 6 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding. She was magnetic, the kind of person who could light up a room just by walking into it. Everyone gravitated toward her, and I was no exception. We dated for 2 years before I proposed, and during that time, I noticed she had what she called a flirty personality. She'd touch people's arms when she laughed, lean in close during conversations, and had this way of making everyone feel like they were the most interesting person in the world. At first, it didn't bother me. I told myself it was just who she was, and besides, she always came home to me. My friends made occasional jokes about it, but I brushed them off. She was my fiancée, and I trusted her completely. The prenup conversation came up when my father sat me down 3 months before the wedding. He built a successful manufacturing business from scratch, and I stood to inherit a significant portion of it. He didn't say it to be cruel, but he mentioned that marriages fail more often than businesses do, and I should protect myself. My wife wasn't thrilled about signing it, but after some tense discussions, she agreed. The document was straightforward. In case of divorce due to infidelity, the offending party would receive only what they brought into the marriage and nothing more. The first year of marriage was mostly good. We bought a house, traveled, and fell into a comfortable routine. But I started noticing things. She'd come home from work events later than expected, always with reasonable explanations about networking or after-work drinks with colleagues. Her phone became something she guarded more carefully, angling it away when she scrolled through messages. Then there was Mark from her office. She mentioned him occasionally at first, then more frequently. He was funny, understood her work stress, and apparently shared her love of obscure indie bands. When I suggested we all grab dinner together, she said it would be weird mixing friend groups like that. The real turning point came at my company's summer barbecue about 18 months into our marriage. I'd invited her to come along, thinking it would be good for her to meet my colleagues. She spent most of the evening talking to my boss, standing close, laughing at everything he said, touching his arm repeatedly. I watched from across the yard as she exhibited all those familiar behaviors, but directed at someone who could potentially impact my career. My boss's wife noticed too. She walked over to me with a tight smile and asked if everything was all right at home. The question hit me harder than it should have. I made some excuse about my wife being naturally social, but the wife just nodded slowly and said she understood what it was like to deal with certain personality types. That night, I brought it up. I told her how uncomfortable her behavior at the barbecue had made me feel, especially since it was my professional environment. She listened, then laughed it off. She said I was being paranoid and insecure, that it was just her personality, and she couldn't help being naturally flirty. She asked if I expected her to change who she was just because I was feeling jealous. I didn't push further that night, but something shifted in me. I started paying closer attention. The next few months revealed patterns I'd been willfully ignoring. She'd take calls in the other room, claiming it was just her sister or a friend from college. She started going to the gym more often, always looking exceptionally put together for someone supposedly going to lift weights. When I casually asked why she was suddenly so committed to fitness, she said she wanted to feel good about herself. I noticed she'd started dressing differently for work, more effort, more carefully chosen outfits. When I complimented her one morning, she barely acknowledged it, already focused on her phone. The distance between us grew wider, even though we were living in the same house. Mark's name came up more and more. They'd grabbed coffee before work. They'd stayed late collaborating on a project. They'd gone to lunch with other colleagues. Every explanation was reasonable on its surface, but the frequency felt wrong. Then came the night she went to a work conference in Chicago. It was a 3-day event, and she seemed excited about it in a way that made my stomach turn. She kissed me goodbye at the airport, reminding me it was just her personality to be enthusiastic about work opportunities. While she was gone, I did something I'm not proud of. I logged into our phone account online and looked at her text message logs. I couldn't see the content, but I could see the numbers and frequency. There was one number she texted constantly, sometimes 50 or 60 times a day. The pattern was clear. Messages started early in the morning and continued until late at night. I felt sick. I'd become the paranoid husband checking phone records, but I couldn't ignore what was right in front of me anymore. When she returned from Chicago, she was different, more distant, more irritable. She snapped at me over small things and spent most of her time in the bedroom on her phone. When I asked if something had happened at the conference, she said everything was fine and that I needed to stop being so needy. The word needy stung. I wasn't asking for much, just basic connection with my own wife. A week later, I came home early from work with a migraine. I walked into our bedroom to find her on a video call, laughing in a way she hadn't laughed with me in months. She quickly ended the call when she noticed me, saying it was just a colleague going over project details. But I'd seen the look on her face, the intimacy in her smile. That wasn't a work call. I asked her directly if she was having an affair. She looked genuinely shocked and denied it immediately. She said I was letting my insecurities destroy our marriage, that her flirty personality didn't mean she was unfaithful, and that I needed to trust her. She turned it around on me, asking why I was so paranoid and whether I was projecting because I'd been unfaithful. I hadn't been, not even close. But her reaction told me everything. She was defensive in a way that felt like a confession. I contacted a private investigator the next day. I didn't want to be that person, but I needed to know the truth. I explained the situation, gave him the details about Mark, and asked him to follow her for 2 weeks. What he found was worse than I'd imagined, but exactly what I'd suspected. She'd been meeting Mark for lunch regularly, but these weren't group lunches with colleagues. They were intimate meals at quiet restaurants where they sat on the same side of the booth. The investigator captured photos of them holding hands across the table, her leaning into him, their faces close together in conversation. Then there were the after-work meetings. She'd told me several times she was going to the gym or running errands, but the investigator followed her to Mark's apartment building. She'd go inside and not emerge for 2 or 3 hours. The evidence was documented meticulously, timestamps, locations, photographs. The final piece came during a supposed girls' night out with her college friends. The investigator followed her to a hotel downtown where Mark was already waiting. They checked in together, and the investigator captured them entering the room. They stayed for 4 hours. When I reviewed the investigator's report, I felt oddly calm. The confirmation hurt, but there was also relief in knowing I wasn't crazy or paranoid. I'd been right, and now I had proof. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I called the lawyer who drafted our prenup and explained the situation. I asked him to review the infidelity clause and tell me exactly what would happen if I filed for divorce based on adultery. He explained it clearly. If I could prove infidelity, the prenup would protect all my premarital assets, including my inheritance and trust fund. She would leave with exactly what she'd brought into the marriage, which wasn't much. She'd been working steadily but didn't have significant savings or assets when we married. Everything we'd acquired together would be split, but the bulk of our wealth was mine from before the marriage. The lawyer asked if I had solid evidence. I told him about the investigator's report, the photographs, the timestamps. He reviewed everything and confirmed it would hold up. He said he'd prepare the paperwork. I went home that evening and found her getting ready to go out. She said she was meeting her sister for dinner and would be back late. I asked which restaurant, and she hesitated before naming a place across town. I knew from the investigator's pattern that she was likely meeting Mark. I told her to have a good time. She looked at me strangely, probably confused by my pleasant tone, but kissed me on the cheek and left. While she was gone, I packed a bag and went to stay at a hotel. I texted her that I needed space to think about things and would be in touch soon. She responded with confusion and concern, asking what was wrong and whether we could talk. I didn't respond. The next morning, my lawyer filed for divorce, citing adultery and invoking the prenup's infidelity clause. The papers were served to her at work, which she later told me was humiliating. But I'd chosen that location deliberately. Her affair had involved her workplace, so it seemed fitting that the consequences would touch that environment too. She called me immediately, frantic and angry. She demanded to know what I was doing, said I was overreacting, and insisted we could work through whatever was bothering me. I told her my lawyer would be in touch and ended the call. Over the next few days, she cycled through every possible response. First came denial. I was making things up, being paranoid, letting jealousy destroy our marriage. Then came minimization. Okay, maybe she'd gotten close to Mark, but nothing physical had happened. They were just friends. Then came the personality defense. She couldn't help being naturally flirty. It was just who she was, and I'd always known that about her. I didn't engage with any of it. My lawyer handled all communication. Her lawyer initially tried to contest the prenup, arguing it was unfair and signed under duress. My lawyer calmly presented the investigator's report, complete with dated photographs, timestamps, and detailed observations. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. That's when her lawyer changed tactics. They argued that her behavior was just her personality, that being friendly and tactile didn't constitute infidelity, and that the photographs were innocent and being misinterpreted. My lawyer then presented the hotel check-in records, which showed her entering Mark's room and not leaving for 4 hours. He presented cell phone records showing hundreds of messages between them. He presented witness statements from the private investigator detailing their repeated meetings and physical intimacy. Her lawyer went quiet. The real moment came during our first face-to-face meeting for the divorce proceedings. She showed up looking exhausted and angry, with her lawyer beside her. My lawyer calmly laid out the evidence piece by piece, explaining how each element clearly demonstrated an ongoing affair that violated the prenup's infidelity clause. She tried to interrupt several times, insisting it wasn't what it looked like, that Mark was just a friend, that her flirty personality was being criminalized. My lawyer let her finish, then asked her directly if she denied meeting Mark at hotels, holding hands with him at restaurants, and spending hours at his apartment while telling me she was elsewhere. She couldn't answer. Her own lawyer put a hand on her arm, warning her not to say anything more. My lawyer then used her own words against her. He referenced the multiple times she defended her behavior as just her personality, arguing that if this was simply her personality, then the prenup was designed for exactly this scenario. He pointed out that the agreement specifically covered infidelity, and her personality-based defense actually proved intent rather than innocence. If being flirty was inherent to who she was, then she'd entered the marriage knowing she might cross boundaries, which made the prenup's protections even more relevant. She looked like she might be sick. The color drained from her face as she realized her own defense had been turned into evidence against her. Her lawyer tried to recover, but there was nowhere to go. The evidence was solid, her own statements undermined her case, and the prenup was ironclad. The divorce proceeded quickly after that. She tried a few more times to negotiate, suggesting we split things more equitably since we'd built some life together. But the prenup was clear, and the evidence of infidelity was undeniable. She would leave with what she'd brought into the marriage, plus half of the minimal assets we'd accumulated together that weren't covered by the prenup. The house stayed with me since I'd purchased it before we married. The investment accounts stayed with me since they were funded with my inheritance. She got her car, her personal belongings, and a small settlement that amounted to her half of our joint savings account. Before the final papers were signed, she asked to speak to me privately. Her lawyer advised against it, but she insisted. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory, with neither lawyer present. She looked different, smaller somehow, defeated. She asked me why I hadn't just talked to her, why I'd gone straight to divorce instead of trying to work things out. I reminded her that I had talked to her, multiple times, about her behavior making me uncomfortable. I'd been dismissed, gaslit, and told I was paranoid and insecure. She started crying, saying she'd made mistakes but that she still loved me. She admitted the affair had gotten out of hand but insisted it hadn't meant anything, that Mark was just excitement and validation during a time when she felt lost. She asked if there was any way to fix things. I told her I couldn't trust her anymore, and without trust, there was no marriage. I also told her that her just my personality defense had revealed something fundamental. She'd never taken responsibility for how her behavior affected me. Even now, she was minimizing and making excuses. She asked what she was supposed to do now. She was losing everything. Our home, our life together, financial security. I reminded her that she'd made choices knowing there would be consequences, and that the prenup she'd signed had outlined those consequences clearly. She left the coffee shop crying, and I sat there feeling empty. There was no satisfaction in watching her fall apart, but there was a grim sense of justice. She'd gambled that her charm and personality would shield her from consequences, and she'd lost. Update 1. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks ago. The legal process moved faster than expected since she eventually stopped contesting the prenup once it became clear she had no viable defense. I've been living in the house alone, which feels both liberating and lonely. I kept everything the same at first, but last week I started making changes. New paint in the bedroom, different furniture arrangement, removing traces of her presence. It's helping. My family has been supportive, though my father had the grace not to say he'd told me so. My friends have rallied around me, taking me out and checking in regularly. A few admitted they'd seen warning signs, but hadn't wanted to interfere in my marriage. I ran into Mark about 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. He was at a grocery store, and we ended up in the same aisle. He looked uncomfortable and tried to avoid eye contact, but I approached him. I asked if he knew she'd been married when they started their affair. He stammered something about not knowing all the details at first, but it became obvious he'd known for a while and hadn't cared. I told him he was welcome to whatever future he wanted with her, but he should know that she'd probably do the same thing to him eventually. People don't change their fundamental character, especially when they've never faced real consequences for their actions. He didn't respond, just hurried away. I later heard through mutual connections that they'd tried to continue their relationship after the divorce, but it fell apart within a month. Apparently, the excitement of an affair doesn't translate well to actual relationship building, especially when there's guilt and resentment involved. She tried to reach out a few times, texts asking how I was doing, whether we could talk, if I'd consider giving her another chance. I didn't respond. My lawyer advised me to keep all communication through legal channels in case any issues arose with the divorce settlement, and I followed that advice. The hardest part hasn't been losing her. It's been processing the fact that I ignored my instincts for so long. Looking back, the signs were there from early in our relationship. I'd just chosen to believe her explanations instead of trusting my own observations. That's something I'm working through now. I've been seeing a therapist who specializes in divorce recovery. She's helped me understand that my desire to trust and believe in my marriage wasn't a weakness, but that I need to learn better boundaries and pay attention to patterns rather than explanations. Last week, something unexpected happened. My boss pulled me aside at work and apologized. He said he'd felt uncomfortable about my wife's behavior at that barbecue, but hadn't known how to bring it up without seeming inappropriate. He mentioned his wife had wanted to warn me, but they'd ultimately decided it wasn't their place to interfere. He said he respected how I'd handled everything and that my professionalism throughout the divorce hadn't gone unnoticed. It was a small moment, but it validated something important. Other people had seen what I'd seen. I wasn't crazy or paranoid. I'd been responding to real problems that everyone else had noticed too. I'm not dating yet. I'm not ready. But I'm also not opposed to it eventually. Right now I'm focused on rebuilding my life as an individual, reconnecting with hobbies I'd neglected, spending time with friends and family, and figuring out who I am outside of that marriage. The irony isn't lost on me that her personality, the thing she claimed was unchangeable and that I just had to accept, ended up being exactly what the prenup protected me against. She'd argued it was just who she was, and the legal system agreed that who she was violated the terms of our marriage contract. I don't wish her harm. I hope she eventually learns from this and makes better choices. But that's not my concern anymore. My concern is moving forward and building a life based on honesty, clear boundaries, and mutual respect. All the things that were missing from my marriage. The house feels more like mine now than it ever did before. I'm making it a space that reflects who I am rather than who we were together. It's a process, but it's also progress. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.